Tunis Carthage. Land in Tunis and the locals say a quiet prayer at the baggage carousel, not for their luggage to arrive, but for it to come out closed. The running joke is that the handlers help themselves to whatever is inside checked bags between the aircraft and the terminal, sending suitcases down to the carousel with the zipper gaping open. The joke is real because the theft is real. Officially, Tunis Carthage sits at the very bottom of AirHelp's airport rankings. In 2025, only 54% of its flights were on time. Then, in 2026, it finished last again, its third straight year at the bottom. And the airline most closely tied to the airport, Tunisair, scored just 0.2 out of 10 for complaint handling. Yeah, 0.2 of a single point. Skytrax also rates Tunisair just 2 stars out of 5, which feels about right for an airport where even getting your suitcase back intact can feel like a bonus. Inside the terminal, the basics are missing. Bathrooms with no soap, no toilet paper, and stall doors that do not close. Currency exchange charges around 12% commission, roughly triple the legal rate. A duty-free shop priced like a high-end mall in Paris, selling products that would cost less at any kiosk in the city outside. The flight information boards somehow make it worse. A flight can be sitting there delayed for hours, while the screen keeps smiling back at everyone with the same little lie. On time. Most passengers learn their gate from the people standing next to them rather than from the airport itself. Basic air conditioning can feel like a luxury when the terminal is packed and the summer heat starts building. Out in the main terminal, summer temperatures push past 35 degrees. The halls overflow with passengers stuck in delays the airport refuses to acknowledge. 3 years running, the worst airport in the world. Well, after 10 minutes inside, the ranking stops feeling like an exaggeration. Kathmandu Tribhuvan. Pilots brief Kathmandu like they brief bad weather, quietly and with caution. Several major airlines have policies requiring only their most experienced captains to fly the approach into Tribhuvan, because the airport itself, not the aircraft and not the airline, is what generally gets you killed. The airport sits at the bottom of a bowl, surrounded by mountain ridges on every side, with the Himalayas a few hundred kilometers north, feeding turbulence and weather changes that arrive without warning. There is one runway, no second runway, and no alternate airport within easy reach. Nepal's entire international, domestic, and military aviation passes through this single 11,000 feet strip of asphalt, in a place where the geography itself does most of the killing. The track record is brutal. In 1992, a Pakistan International Airlines Airbus A300 was descending into Tribhuvan on the multi-step Sierra approach, the one that requires crews to step down through 7 defined altitudes to thread between the mountains. The crew began their descent one step too early. The aircraft hit the side of a ridge at full cruise speed. 167 people lost. 3 months earlier, a Thai Airways flight had crashed in almost exactly the same area, taking 113 more. In 2018, a U.S. Bangla bombardier touched down 5,600 feet past the threshold, veered off the runway, and burst into flames. 51 people lost. None of these crashes shared a cause: the mountains, the weather, the single runway with nowhere to divert, and the approach that punishes any error all kept producing different versions of the same outcome. The airport's own infrastructure makes it worse. A 2025 investigation into a fatal crash the year before found that the runway safety strip did not meet international standards. The aircraft came to rest in a low-lying area beside the runway, where rescue access was severely limited. In a crash, those extra minutes can be the difference between getting out alive and never getting out at all. Tribhuvan is not dangerous because of one thing. It is dangerous because every single layer of the operation, from the geography to the runway to the rescue infrastructure, has been working against the people flying in and out of here for over 30 years. Charles de Gaulle. On May 23, 2004, at exactly 7 a.m., a section of Terminal 2E collapsed on top of the passengers underneath it. The roof, less than a year old, gave way without warning. A huge section of the terminal's futuristic roof crashed into the boarding area. 4 people did not survive. 7 more were injured. The terminal had been celebrated when it opened as a masterpiece of modern aviation design, a futuristic vaulted ceiling with no internal columns, a future of travel building. 20 years later, the rebuilt section is back in service. The lesson, apparently, was not learned. This is Paris Charles de Gaulle, one of Europe's busiest airports, the second busiest airport in Europe, the showcase national hub of France, and one of the most exhausting buildings any traveler will ever pass through. Terminal 1 was designed in the 1970s as a circular concrete donut surrounded by 7 satellite buildings. Anyone who needs to connect between terminals here learns quickly that the layout makes very little sense. Connecting between certain terminals requires leaving the secure area entirely, walking outside, taking an internal train, going through security again, going through passport control again. A 90-minute connection at CDG, by international standards, is considered dangerously short. Frequent flyers build 3-hour buffers and still miss flights regularly. The little automated train linking the terminals at Charles de Gaulle breaks down often enough that travelers check its status online before flying. The 70 million passengers a year pass through a facility designed for less than half that volume. Cleaning staff strikes are routine, and the bathrooms at some terminals can go out of service for weeks at a time. Passport control bottlenecks for non-EU arrivals regularly run past 90 minutes on top of whatever flight delay brought you here in the first place. There has been talk for years about modernizing CDG and easing the connection chaos. The CDG Express, a direct express rail link to central Paris, was announced years ago and is now targeted for 2027. The terminal rename that was meant to clarify the layout is scheduled for the same year. 20 years after the roof came down, Charles de Gaulle is still the airport that buries its problems instead of solving them. Beauvais-Tillé. The airport is called Paris-Beauvais. It is not in Paris. It is 85 kilometers north of Paris, closer to Belgium than to the Eiffel Tower, in a small town most French people could not point to on a map. The Paris name is a marketing trick that low-cost airlines use to sell tickets at city center prices for an airport that is, by every reasonable measure, an hour and a half away from where the passenger actually wants to be. This is Beauvais-Tillé, operated almost entirely for Ryanair and Wizz Air, where the math goes something like this. The ticket is cheap. The bus to Paris costs 18 euros and takes 90 minutes on a good day, longer during strikes or traffic, which is most days. A taxi is between 160 and 200 euros and will probably refuse to come out this far after 10 p.m. The trains require multiple transfers and end up taking longer than the bus. The airport itself closes between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., so if your flight lands late or your bus to Paris breaks down at 11:30, you sleep on the curb until morning. The terminal experience matches the location. Passengers describe T2 as more shed than airport, overcrowded from the moment it opens, with one understaffed cafe trying to feed several hundred people. The security process is chaotic. Liquids that pass through every other airport in Europe get thrown out here depending on the inspector's mood. Multiple verified reviews describe check-in desks closing for staff lunch breaks, leaving more than 100 people stuck in line for half an hour, with no announcement and nobody to ask. Toilets are overwhelmed by mid-morning. Seating is inadequate. Skytrax and Trustpilot reviews use phrases like punishment from the gods and hell on earth, which is the kind of language paying customers normally reserve for the airlines themselves. John F. Kennedy International. Connecting between terminals at JFK can require leaving the secure area entirely. Get off a domestic flight at Terminal 4. Pick up your bag. Walk outside. Take an AirTrain shuttle. Wait in line. Go through security again. Go through immigration if you are flying international. Walk to the gate. By the time most passengers finish that process, their connecting flight has either left or has been delayed enough that they probably should have just stayed home. This is JFK, the busiest international airport in the United States, the front door of New York City, and one of the most expensive case studies in modern aviation of what happens when you let private money build 6 different airports next to each other and call it a single facility. The 6 terminals at JFK were built by different airlines decades apart, with their own gates, security checkpoints, immigration halls, and almost no coordination between them. Terminal 1 hosts international carriers like Air France, Lufthansa, Korean Air, and Japan Airlines, while Delta runs Terminal 4, American owns Terminal 8, and JetBlue operates Terminals 5 and 6. None of these terminals were designed to share passengers easily, and none of the architects from one ever talked to the architects of the next. The result is a connection trap. Over a quarter of JFK's flights experience disruptions on any given day. On bad days, delays can blow past an hour before passengers even leave the gate. Customs and immigration lines for international arrivals routinely run past 90 minutes. The air train that is supposed to move passengers between terminals breaks down frequently enough that connecting travelers miss flights regularly. The fix is a $19 billion redevelopment that started in 2023 and is scheduled to continue through 2030, with 2 new terminals being built, existing ones expanded, and roadways rerouted across the entire facility. None of the construction has fixed the underlying design problem yet, because the underlying design problem was the original decision to build 6 airports inside one fence. New York spent more rebuilding JFK than most countries spend on their entire aviation infrastructure. The result is still a punishment. London Heathrow. On a single Tuesday in July 2022, of the 1,184 flights scheduled to depart London Heathrow, only 1 showed up on time. Everything else was delayed or cancelled. The world's busiest hub had collapsed so completely that the airport itself imposed a daily passenger cap of 100,000 people through the rest of the summer, asked airlines to stop selling tickets, and watched as luggage piled up in the terminals to the point that aerial photos that month showed mountains of suitcases sitting outside on the tarmac. This is London Heathrow, the busiest international airport in Europe, the most important aviation gateway in the United Kingdom, and one of the most expensive facilities to operate from anywhere in the world. Heathrow's landing fees are routinely cited as among the highest of any major airport on Earth, which is why airlines complain publicly about them every few years, and why the prices passed on to passengers are some of the steepest in the industry. What that money is supposed to buy is a smooth, efficient, world-class hub experience. What it actually buys, with depressing regularity, is the opposite. The 2022 collapse was not a one-off. In June 2024, an IT failure at Terminal 5 caused British Airways luggage to vanish into the system, with passengers waiting over 90 minutes at the carousel before being told to leave the airport and have their bags sent to them at home. In December 2022, scenes in Terminal 5 included passengers sitting on dead baggage belts and lying on the floor while bags failed to arrive for hours. The customer service desk was described as abandoned. The recurring problem is staff. Heathrow and the airlines that operate from it have spent the years since COVID running on a system that was cut to the bone and never rebuilt. Whenever traffic spikes, the same chaos returns. Cancellations stack up. Queues form at security that wrap past the food court. Bags get lost in volumes that make headlines. Some of the highest airport fees in the world. Some of the worst recurring chaos in any major hub. Heathrow has spent the better part of the last 5 years apologizing to the passengers who pay for the privilege of flying through it. Lagos Murtala. The phrase you hear most often from staff at Lagos Murtala Muhammed International Airport, anywhere between the gate and the exit, is, "Anything for the boys?" It is the polite version of "give us money." It is asked by police, by immigration officers, by customs agents, by security staff, sometimes by people in uniforms nobody can quite identify, across a chain of checkpoints that passengers and anti-corruption investigators say creates too many chances for harassment and extortion. This is the busiest airport in West Africa, Nigeria's main international gateway, and according to years of passenger complaints, investigative reporting, and even Nigerian aviation officials, one of the most openly corrupt aviation facilities operating today. The problem is the number of overlapping agencies and checkpoints, each with the power to stop a passenger, search a bag, or create a delay. Each one is staffed by officers who can detain, search, ask questions, and create a problem. Most of those problems can be made to go away with cash. In May 2025, 2 customs officers at Lagos searched a Nigerian American returning from the United States, claimed he owed roughly $3,000 in customs duties on his personal belongings, demanded the money be transferred to a personal account, and walked away with it. The incident only became public because the victim filed a complaint loud enough to reach the media. It is not exceptional, it is the operating model. Passengers describe checked bags arriving with broken locks and missing contents, electronics, jewelry, gifts, clothes. They describe being escorted to ATMs to withdraw cash for fictional fines. They describe gate areas with no air conditioning, broken speaker announcements nobody can understand, immigration queues that run 2 hours on a slow day, and the persistent feeling of being processed as a customer rather than a passenger. An American travel vlogger who has filmed his experience at airports across the world described Lagos as the definition of corruption that would appear in a dictionary. Multiple aviation reviewers have called it the worst airport on the planet. The Nigerian government has acknowledged the problem repeatedly and promised reforms repeatedly. The anything for the boys still gets asked at every checkpoint, every day, on every flight. Manila Ninoy Aquino. Most airports inconvenience their passengers. Manila Ninoy Aquino International invented a way to extort them. In September 2015, a 20-year-old American missionary named Lane Michael White was stopped at Ninoy Aquino security after officers said they had found a single live bullet in his luggage. White had no firearm, no permit, no history of weapons charges, and no explanation for how the bullet had ended up in his bag. He was charged under Philippine law with illegal possession of ammunition. He was held. He was told the case could go away for the equivalent of about $700. He refused to pay. He spent months in legal limbo while his family pleaded with the international media. White was not the only one. Over the months that followed, at least 30 documented cases emerged of Manila airport security personnel allegedly planting live bullets in the luggage of departing passengers and then demanding payment to make the charges disappear. Most of the victims were elderly Filipinos returning to family, overseas workers heading back to their jobs abroad, or foreign tourists with flights to catch. The scheme was called Tanim Bala, which translates roughly to bullet planting, and it became internationally infamous. A Japanese TV show reenacted it as a comedy sketch. A Filipino developer released a mobile game where players had to swat planted bullets out of their luggage. The Philippine president at the time, Benigno Aquino III, publicly described concerns about the scandal as sensationalized. The scheme continued. Reforms were promised. New protocols were introduced. The Office for Transportation Security pledged that Tanimbala was a thing of the past. Then, in March 2025, a 69-year-old Filipino grandmother named Ruth Adele was stopped at Ninoy Aquino Terminal 3 on her way to Vietnam with her family by officers who claimed an X-ray scan had detected a bullet casing in her handbag. A manual search found nothing. The officers laughed when she threatened to report them. She posted the entire experience on social media within hours. 3 security personnel were fired within 4 days. The Philippine president, this time Ferdinand Marcos Jr., ordered an investigation, the same investigation his predecessor had ordered 10 years earlier. Beyond the scandal, the airport has the everyday problems most badly run airports have: aging terminals built in the 1980s, immigration lines that routinely run past 2 hours, air conditioning that fails in a tropical climate, ceilings that leak during the rainy season. Multiple international ranking bodies have called it the worst airport in Asia. But everything else is just an airport being bad. Most bad airports just inconvenience you. Manila is the only airport in the world that committed organized crimes against its own passengers.